Hey guys, welcome to the Eerie Side Podcast with your host, Dee.
And Sophia.
Unfortunately, this week, Elena will not be able to join us. We appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you're ready to get on the Eerie Side. Before we get into the show, we would appreciate if you all could give the podcast a follow and make sure the bell notification is turned on so you'll be notified whenever we drop an episode. If you enjoy the show, we would love to have you leave us a review. And if there's a case suggestion or any feedback you'd like to share, feel free to send us a message in the text box below. Share the podcast with family, friends, co-workers, or really anyone you think will enjoy it. Please follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. All right, I'm going to have an episode today. It's a little different than the other ones. And the reason is I'm going to be talking about something that's really unknown. I'm going to be talking about the UFO sightings at the Hudson Valley from 1982 to 1986. I know that they're not called UFOs right now or unidentified flying objects, and they are called UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. For the sake of the story and respect of its time period, I will call them UFOs because that is what they were called back then. In the early 1980s, for several years, thousands of people saw V-shaped and circular formations of UFOs over the Hudson Valley, many as large as football fields.
So the UFOs were V-shaped, or the patterns they were moving in?
Most of the people saw were mostly V-shaped, but they also saw circular formations.
Formations being what, the shape of the UFOs,
Yes,
or the way
yes.
they were moving?
No, the shapes of the UFOs.
Okay.
The sightings came in waves, often occurring in the same few areas and often the same day of the week. The first recorded sighting was a few minutes before midnight on December 31st, 1981. An anonymous off-duty police officer and his family saw a boomerang-shaped object drift slowly over the top of their home in Kent, New York. They saw the solid structure with roughly 15 red, green, and white lights anchored to its underside. It maintained a constant altitude of about 150 meters, which is about 500 feet, moved at a gently walking pace, and made only a faint hum. At one point, the lights went out, and 3 binding white lights in the shape of a triangle appear in their place. And 5 seconds later, the colored lights appeared. Then it drifted out of sight. Next, Edward Hansen, 55 years old, appears to have seen the same object while traveling down Interstate 84 only moments after the family saw the object. Hansen, among others, stopped on the side of the road and watched a boomerang formation of lights that projected a bright beam of light to the ground. It was so large that it filled the sky in front of him and made slow, tight circles in the air. Just as he thought he would like to take a closer look, the object moved in his direction. He panicked as it approached. Then he heard a voice in his head that instructed him not to be afraid. At the same time, the object turned away and the beam went out. Hansen said that he felt thoughts that weren't his own and believed he had received a telepathic communication from the UFO. Many witnesses reported similar communication in the next few years or felt the UFO had read their minds. Nearly 2 months later, on February 26, 1982, Monique Crystal and her daughter followed a lighted object down several miles on a country road and watched it pass over the car. It hovered over a frozen lake, and Mane came out of the car to watch it. The object had 50 blue, red, and amber lights, and a large amber light in the middle. It was 60 to 90 meters, about 200 to 300 feet across, and perfectly silent. Mane claims that its underside was lined with metal beams and crisscross supports like the underside of a bridge. Although it started to go away, the exact moment she wished for it to stay, it turned back and flew towards her, and retreated when she got scared. There were several witnesses nearby who saw the same object at the exact same time and later when it crossed Interstate 84. The police in Kent and Carmel, New York, and Danbury, Connecticut all received a flood of calls of a UFO that night. The 1984 Hudson Valley UFO sightings are called the Westchester Boomerang, where the UFO sightings stretched throughout 1983 and 84 in New York and western Connecticut. Reports primarily occurred from March of 1983 through the summer of 1984 in the Hudson Valley region of the northeastern United States, including Westchester County, Dutchess County, and Putnam County in New York, and Fairfield County in Connecticut. According to the New York Times, residents reported seeing objects about the size of an American football field, usually in a V shape or a circle, absolutely noiseless and outlined in bright lights of white, red, or green. The objects were described as being able to shoot straight up in the sky and hover in the air for extended periods of time. The sightings renewed the spring of 1983. On March 17, 1983, a woman in Brewster, New York, saw a V-shaped object with numerous lights, all colors of the rainbow, arranged along its wings, and one bright large light in the center. It then made a sharp turn and flew 2 doors down to the home of Dennis Sant, a deputy clerk of Putnam County, New York, and he saw the object hovering over his yard early that night and confessed he had a strong urge to look for it outside. He found it hovering over the Interstate 84 and ran inside to get his family. As soon as he wished he could get closer look at it, it rotated in his direction and floated towards him and stopped at 12 meters, which is 40 feet away. That was pretty close.
It sounds like it's perhaps being telepathic, like these other people were describing.
He did say it seemed to come close to him.
Right, when he asked. He wanted it to.
And 40 feet is not that far. Just under 40 meters, 130 feet long, and more than 100 meters or 330 feet wide, had many red, green, and white lights along its side, and an amber light that swept from one end of the V to the other. As it hovered there, the lights grew to be 3 times as bright. Sant and his father were so close to it that they could see its dark metal surface and heard finely tuned engine sound. The following week, March 24th, 1983, another wave of sightings, mostly in Yorktown. Many witnesses were Yorktown police officers who admitted that their switchboard was flooded with calls of a large boomerang UFO with red, blue, and green lights. Police in the nearby village of Newcastle received a flood of calls as well, described an object as large as a football field. Bill Helly, a meteorologist, saw an asymmetrical V-shaped object that was about 400 meters, 1,312 feet long, with 6 or 7 lights. The object descended from about 600 to 300 meters, which is from 2,000 to 1,000 feet altitude, and slowed its approach. Helly realized that the lights were all changing colors at different times. He thought it was as if the light was from a rotating prism within the structure. Suddenly all the lights went out, leaving nothing in their place, and as if whatever object that was supporting them disappeared. The lights reappeared 30 to 40 seconds later, and a few seconds later the object flew to the north and flew away as its lights changed to a slime green. At the same time, 15 minutes north in Putnam County, people saw a smaller object exhibiting similar behaviors. It was a big night for sightings. Well, then the press got the wind of the phenomena. On March 26, 1983, Westchester Rockland Daily Item, as well as the North County News, published a story of the sighting that the lights had returned. There were several thousand witnesses on March 24th sighting. 85% of the sightings occurred on an area less than 60 square kilometers, which is 23 square miles, in Westchester and Putnam counties in the Taconic Parkway. The reports describe the same type boomerang-shaped objects moving 20 to 50 kilometers per hour, from 12.5 miles to 31 miles an hour, and many times hovering over a body of water. Every sighting had somewhat different behavior. Witnesses reported seeing lights jump positions in sky, disappear and reappear in place, and release self-propelled lighted objects. Some saw lights detach from the formation and move on their own.
It's interesting that the lights detached and were moving on their own. That's not what I was expecting.
There's something showing they would move up and down, but that might make sense to something else that I'm going to explain later on as to what some of these sightings may have been, but not all of them.
Yeah, because I wonder what the purpose of those lights would be if they had to disconnect and then attach. And honestly, what the purpose of these UFOs being specifically in this area for a period of time is something I'm also curious about.
I will be describing that further later, what people think is going on also. On October 28th, Jim Book, a biomedical engineer, and I think he was also working at IBM, saw a massive light boomerang-shaped object fly up and hover over the Croton Falls Reservoir. It was at least 30 meters long, which is 100 feet, and 9 red lights on its side. It began moving around the reservoir and maintained a constant altitude of 4.5 meters, which is 15 feet above the water level. Each time it stopped, it released a cherry red light and projected a type of screen from its underside that appeared to interact with the water. The object made no noise at all, and its lights went out every time another car passed by. The Yorktown police declared that the UFOs were nothing but a group of planes flying in formation, although they were never able to identify the culprits. And the Putnam police declared that the lights belonged to a squadron of ultralight aircrafts flying in formation. However, ultralights bounce around in the breeze and be nearly impossible to fly in perfect formation, as they make a motor engine noise like a lawnmower that would have been perfectly audible in nearly every sighting. Do you remember what an ultraplane looks like?
No.
It's the one that Elena went up with a guy and it was all open.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
So the police were saying that's what the people were seeing.
I also went up in that plane. In case you forgot, Mom.
Yes, I did forget that you did go on it also.
I'm confused. What is this plane about? I got
They
lost.
claim that there were a few of those up and they were flying in perfect formation. And that's what people were seeing at night.
Who claims this?
The Putnam police.
And why do they claim this?
I don't know.
Were these planes actually flying in motion, or is it just...
So it was just something they claimed. Yeah, there's another claim coming later on. The Federal Aviation Administration told the police on multiple occasions that the lights belonged to unspecified airplanes or helicopters. Later conducted an investigation of the sightings, but never shared their conclusions.
I wonder why.
The police department at Brewster and Carmel said an official at the Stewart Air Force Base told them that the lights were planes being transferred from the base. The base denies this. The state police officer of Troop K followed the lights to the small Stormville Airport in Dutchess County and reported back to Sergeant Kenneth V. Spiro that it was a group of light planes that flew in formation. The undersides and under the wings were painted black, so they couldn't be seen from the ground. The planes were rigged with bright lights, and they could turn from one color to another. The lights had given it the shape of the UFO. According to the police officer who spoke to a couple of pilots, he said that the pilots were getting a big kick out of it and there was no violation of the law to what they were doing. According to Timothy L. Harnett, the deputy director of the eastern region of the FAA, he said the planes were flying as close together as they feel safe in areas of sparse population and that the planes could fly as low as 500 feet. In February 8 of 1984, Poughkeepsie Journal tracked down one of those pilots to interview. To find this pilot, they had to talk to dozens of air officials, police agencies, and other pilots. The pilot they tracked down said that they flew single-engine planes, sometimes Cessnas 152s, fly in V-shape or diamond formation as close as a wingspan apart. Each aircraft will require red, green, and white navigation lights as well as bright white landing lights. At least one of the pilots, usually near the end of the formation, used a rotation beacon that warned nearby aircraft. The formation traveled faster than 100 miles per hour, but might appear motionless because it is so wide and can be seen from long distance. This is what the pilot says, okay? If someone's on the ground and we're moving toward or away from him, it might appear we're not moving at all. The pilots usually take off separately, then slowly move into formation one by one until a crude V shape is formed with as many as 5 planes. Then they fly together for miles, making constant adjustments along the way. He said that the pilots usually stick to a well-known path over the Taconic Parkway and traveled as far south as Westchester County. He said that to be safe, the pilots don't fly in this formation for more than 1 hour. A spokesman for the FAA, Louis Architoff, manager of the public affairs for the agency that regulates commercial flights, confirmed that it's not illegal to fly like this. He did say that unless you are good, it's risky at night. Not only are you looking for each other, you have to watch for other aircraft in the area. He said, actually, I think it's kind of foolhardy. So these pilots supposedly were the UFOs, or claimed to have been.
They claim to have been.
Right.
What do you think?
I expressed my opinion at the end because there's more on this. But that's what they claim.
Okay. I think I need more information before I can make my own opinion on this.
They claim that how far they can go and how fast and when they did it.
But they claim they were the ones behind those supposed planes.
Correct. They claim that they were the UFO that people were seeing.
They could also be forced to be claiming this.
True. Another local pilot said some of the formation flyers told him they enjoyed the UFO publicity. They get laughs reading about it in the paper. The pilot of the formation said that he and his fellow flyers have no plans to go public. The pilot that says he was part of this formation. This is their private enjoyment and they didn't want to stop, but they didn't want to be hounded either. And he said that if someone tagged him, asked him if he's one of the flyers, he'll deny it and then he'll stop. He also said that Thursday was the most convenient flight time for the pilots. The pilot said, I do think people are ignorant about flying and allow imagination to make up for a lot of things. In 1984, Discover magazine reported that a group of pilots practicing their formation skills first in the daytime, and then when they became more confident at night, became tight formations of aircraft, as with little as 6 inches between wingtips, which is really not that far away. According to the skeptic writer Brian Dunning, there's no evidence that these pilots ever intended a UFO hoax, but when local newspapers began printing stories about the strange sightings and experiences, and television stations ran tapes of the mysterious lights in the sky, the pilots were incredulous, then amused. The group began calling themselves the Martians.
So these pilots were supposedly flying their planes 16 inches.
6 inches from wing per each wings. Each wing was only 6 inches
I have a hard time to believe that they actually did that. I mean, the room for error is so little, and I don't think as humans we are capable of that.
That's what they claim, and that's why a lot of people grasp on that they wasn't UFOs, it was these airplanes.
But they wish they had the technology and the skill to do that.
I'm not saying they did or didn't. This is also what they say. The pilots would turn off their exterior lights at the same time, which would make the aircraft appear to disappear from the sky. They vary their formations from crescents and circles to crosses that looked from the ground like diamonds or V's, giving rise to reports about different and sometimes startling UFO shapes.
Are airplanes even allowed to be turning off their lights? Because I thought they needed to keep them on for safety purposes.
I don't know. They would turn them off and then turn them on again.
I thought planes are not supposed to be turn off their lights for the safety purposes.
Oh, they probably don't. I don't know what to tell you. I'm telling you what they did.
Well, what, what they're claiming to say.
Yes. One thing to keep in mind is that the Cessna's 152s can't hover, and their engines are not silent or have soft hums, and they can't move backwards.
That sounds like pretty limiting technology based upon what witnesses saw.
Right. The witnesses, most of them said they heard soft hum or nothing, like it was very silent, and it moved backwards and it hovered. Cessnas cannot do any of that.
Exactly.
March 25th, 1984, a year after the big flap, another wave of sightings began and several more occurred that summer. This time around, the behavior and shapes of the colors were more varied than ever. They were having flying X's, crosses, and circular formations. They have a video of a cross formation. Some people report UFOs hovering overhead and bathed them in beams of light. On March 25th alone, there was an estimate of 200 to 300 people saw a UFO again and over the Taconic Parkway. The Commerce police had at least 20 calls, and the police saw it themselves. A lieutenant with the department said that he was sure himself that it was not a conventional aircraft. So now the police department is saying, when they are seeing it, that it's not a conventional aircraft. There were more sightings on March 31st, 1984, and more that summer. On June 11th, 1984, a giant V-shaped formation of lights buzzed the town board meeting at Newcastle County. Several officers saw the object, and the neighboring county airport tracked it on radar. On July 12, 1984, and again the 19th and 24th, people saw circular formations of the lights across Connecticut and New York State. There is an estimate that there were 5,000 witnesses on the first night alone. At least 12 were police officers, and one was a Danbury County Chief, Nelson Macedo. He was on a fishing boat with family and friends on Candlewood Lake, Connecticut, when they saw a circular object with multicolored lights hovering overhead. The lights seemed to be spinning, but the object stayed still. When the operator shut the boat's lights off, the object lights went off as well. On and off with the same effect. They were doing an on and off, and the object did the same thing. On July 24th, 1984, Bob Poggioli captured some lights on film in Brewster, New York. The lights were circular. You could see that also on YouTube.
Oh, there's actually video footage of it.
Yeah. William A. Pollard, driving on Interstate 84, recounted to the New York Times that he saw an object hovering about 30 feet from the ground in a field, a gigantic triangle with lights. It shot straight up after turning off its lights. Pollard said he had seen the lights many times, but the first time was very different from everything he saw later. It was rigid. Mahopac resident Irene Lund reported a sighting on Monday, August 20, 1984, about 9 p.m. She said it was headed south over a pond, just clearing the trees. There was no sound at all. You could hear the crickets. About 3/4 the size of my house, with an L-shaped structure suspended underneath it. At one point, all the lights were green, then red, then went back to a pattern of green, red, and white. I felt it was letting me know it knew we were watching it. That was scary. It went on for about 10 minutes. In 1985, HBO did a special production of the UFOs and sent the Poggioli film to Dr. L. Hibbs of Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Pasadena. Specialists were unable to identify the lights. On 2 occasions in June, workers and guards at the Indian Point nuclear reactor complex, Buchanan, New York, had seen an object hover over the site, and the facility's security systems had mysteriously shut down. There were a few more sightings in 1984, but in the following years they started declining. Although the sightings decreased in frequency after 1984, the sightings do continue to this day. In 1992, Unsolved Mysteries devoted an episode to the Hudson Valley sightings and interviewed many of the police officers who saw the UFOs, which brought credibility to their accounts. UFO investigators found some patterns in the dates and interesting discoveries. First, reports were remarkably consistent of triangular or boomerang-shaped objects and sometimes circular. These objects have been reported in the southern states since the mid-1970s, and similar reports in U.S. date back to since 1951. Just a few years later, in 1989 and 90s, there was a wave of sightings over Belgium that involved black triangular objects that behaved in the same manner that the Hudson Valley UFOs. In 1997, a giant light V-shaped object buzzed the city of Phoenix, Arizona. However, not all the witnesses in Hudson Valley reported the same UFOs. A building inspector in Torrington, Connecticut saw a cigar-shaped craft with 4 windows, and the guards at the Indian Point nuclear reactor complex saw an object shaped like an ice cream cone. While some insisted there was a solid structure behind the lights, others weren't certain there was. Not sure if that means there's differences due to error and observations, or there's a variety of sighted objects. Second, sightings were heavily clustered geographically and felt disproportionately on Monday, Thursday, and Sunday nights.
That's so weird.
What's more, that some of the biggest nights for the sightings in 1984 fell on the same dates as the biggest nights as the year before. No one has been able to make sense of these curious anomalies in the data or explain why such concentration of sightings in the same 3,700 square kilometers, which is about 1,430 square miles, of the Hudson Valley region.
I wonder if there's some sort of nature phenomena that is happening or stronger on those dates that we are unaware of that makes these unidentified objects decide to come out on those days.
I'm not sure. It could be something that's doing that. I do know that as you read more and more about this, people are commenting saying that they have seen them. Many people said they were growing up, they would see these objects. One gentleman said he was just going home after shopping with his parents in a mall, and he could see the object following them.
They sound like common occurrences in this town at that point.
Yes, it does seem that. I wouldn't be surprised if more people saw them. Many maybe never reported it.
Yes, 100%. And I can understand why they would not want to report it as well.
Yes, and what's really interesting is they've taken these sightings and have been able to find similarities, which usually you don't hear about it. So I find it interesting that there's some similarities here.
Right. Remember when you were talking about the lights and they were changing their patterns?
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder. Now, perhaps there's somebody who's changing these lights in real time as they interact with people. It also makes me wonder that maybe they're somehow powered by AI intelligence as well.
They could be. If these are real UFOs, and I'm not saying they are, and for them to even come to our planet, they must have something advanced like an AI.
And that's if you're going along with the theory that it's powered by a different species, by a different planet.
Correct. The third thing that they found, however, is that the most of the area most visited by UFOs contain a lot of government-owned land.
Oh, really?
Yes. The land is dotted by abandoned mines and rich in iron ores. Local claims to have experienced unusual number of electrical disturbances there.
This puts an interesting twist on things.
I think mines rich in iron ore and U.S. government owned land is interesting.
Well, it makes you wonder which one they're there for, and perhaps both.
Correct. Lastly, many said that they had telepathic exchanges with the UFOs they saw. This is common in UFO reports. This suggests that there is an intelligence behind the UFO phenomenon that is able to interface with the human mind directly.
That's also very unique and interesting to hear about. Because not all people who have experienced UFOs say that they have had some sort of telepathic communication with someone.
True. There were some reports of missing time, as well as strange dreams and abduction experiences that occurred at the same time as the sightings. There was a high strangeness in the UFO reports that were difficult to explain.
A high strangeness?
Yes, there were some strange things that were happening, abductions and stuff, but those were difficult to explain because not as many people saw them. So they categorized that as that.
But then it also makes you wonder if they did abduct somebody, why only those times? They were there for many periods of time. If you're going to abduct somebody, my first thought process is you don't need to keep going to that same area over and over again to abduct someone. But who knows? It's hard to say what these UFOs are actually doing in these areas, especially if the accounts are different from different people.
Yes, there is unfortunately a lot of unexplained situations here. At least they did try to figure it out. Over 30 years later, the Hudson Valley sightings of the early to mid-1980s are the longest running and most intensely studied in the UFOs in history. Many sightings had trained observers and multiple independent witnesses, and some were even collaborated on radar. The data shows that the UFO's activity over the Hudson Valley followed a number of strange but discernible patterns. After decades of denying their existence, the Pentagon has acknowledged UFOs are real and may explain what has been seen in the skies over New York. And although a task force reviewed hundreds of new reports of UFOs in 2022, there's no evidence of alien life, officials said in a required report to Congress. The new all-domain anomaly office did leave some intrigue, ending its report with a teaser. Additional information is provided in the classified version of this report, so we don't know exactly what's on all the report. And if it wasn't enough to pique your curiosity, a career Air Force intelligence officer turned whistleblower claimed to Congress that the U.S. government is withholding information about a covert program to retrieve crashed alien spacecraft and reverse engineer the technology.
What a surprise.
We're not alone. Jonathan Gray, a U.S. intelligence official with the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, who confirmed former intelligence officer David Grush's claim, told Debrief, an outlet, that it reporters on science, technology, and defense news. The Pentagon has denied Grush's claim. Grush has claimed that they're taking spacecrafts and doing reverse technology. The way I see it, the UFOs are one of the following, or maybe more than one. The Cessnas 152s, maybe some of the sightings were this, but I don't think all of them were.
Right.
One is that they can't hover, they make noise. I don't think they were out there all the days they were being seen. I do think maybe sometimes they were out there, and some people did see them and thought they were UFOs, but I don't think all the sightings are this.
They can't explain for all of the sightings, and there are times where people will think there's an object in the sky that looks weird, and then I, for example, will take a look at the picture or the video, and I'm like, this looks like an airplane. This does not look like it's anything unusual. But I don't think we can put that same thought process to everyone who has these experiences, because many people see things that cannot be explained, and so we can't just discredit everything that somebody sees in the sky.
Right. There was a push for those Cessnas. I don't know if the government was trying to do it. It just seems that they may have been, but I just don't see every sighting was that. It just doesn't make sense. They can't hover over water or anywhere. But they can't fly up and down, go straight in the sky and come down. They're airplanes. They fly a certain way. They're not helicopters. They don't do that. The other thing are drones, especially multirotors. They have the ability to hover. Modern drones, particularly the multirotor drones with 4 or more motors, can hover in place and fly vertically. Some are capable of staying in the air for extended periods depending on their battery life, usually 30 minutes to a few hours. Their limitations: the hover time is generally constrained by battery capacity, and while they can shoot straight up, they often are limited to such shorter durations compared to other aircrafts. Some stealth drones or UAVs designed for reconnaissance and surveillance, like the RQ-170 Sentinel or more advanced prototypes, might have hovering capability in certain designs. However, these are not typically silent in the strictest sense and still have noise from their rotors or engines.
Did they have drones back in the 80s?
Well, if they were advanced technology and we didn't know about it, the answer could be yes.
You mean governmental
Yes,
technology?
governmental technology.
Drones are very loud. They're not quiet. And they're also small compared to the size that some of these people were saying the aircrafts were. Football fields.
However, nowadays they put drones up and they do designs and they look quite big. So if there was something of that sort, I'm not saying that's what it was. I'm just saying we just have to look at all the things that it could be.
That's true.
There are ongoing efforts to develop quieter, low observable drones with VTOL capabilities. However, they're not out there. So I'm going to just say that we just need to keep our options open. I'm not saying that they were drones. Don't forget, some technology probably the government has developed before it goes to the public, and maybe the drones were one of them. I'm just saying maybe. I'm not saying for sure. Number 3 is potential future tech. There have been rumors and classified reports about future stealth aircrafts or prototypes that could hover silently, possibly using innovative propulsion systems like ion thrusters or advanced hybrid electric engines, but nothing has been fully verified or deployed for public use. Concepts such as the X-15 successor or more advanced stealth helicopters might one day use technology to dramatically reduce noise during hovering, but again, these aren't fully realized yet. So these are supposedly like helicopters that can go up and down, they can hover, that maybe are more advanced than we're aware of, that do not make much noise. However, it does not explain the size of what was seen by people.
Well, it also doesn't explain the telepathic experiences some of these individuals had as well.
That's true, and I'm trying to be open-minded and bring up what else could they be other than maybe UFOs. I did research to find what other crafts could be making it. Now, we don't have any craft that we know that's big as a football field that can fly like that. We do have crafts that can hover, helicopters, but they're too loud. We do have airplanes that could do some things. We do have drones, but none of them fit in perfectly. Another thing that could work, maybe, is theoretical silent aircraft. In the realm of science fiction and future military concepts, there are potential design for aircraft that could use an advanced propulsion technology like electromagnetic propulsion or ducted fan systems that can make hovering near silent. But these are still in the conceptual or experimental phases. In short, no hovering aircraft today is completely silent, but there are some that are relatively quiet compared to traditional rotorcraft. Stealth and noise reduction are a focus of future military aircraft, so advancement in these areas might bring us closer to your ideal silent hovering craft in the future.
So if you're going to go with this theory, you're going to have to assume that the UFOs were not completely silent like people described, or there's some sort of technology that the government has that they are using to create these silent aircrafts that we are not exposed to or aware of.
Correct. That's what you're looking at. And the last thing is, it's really a UFO. Now, like I said, I do believe some of the sightings were the Cessnas. I don't believe all of them. I don't know if anything was secret government craft. I have no idea. We're talking of many thousands of people who saw these, and some of them felt something too. And they could see underneath that they were smooth. Only one story says that they looked like a metal over a bridge. Everybody else was more like smooth looking. Now, airplanes are not smooth looking underneath. Even if they're black, you'd be able to see wheels at some point. So that's the question, really, is what were they? And I don't think that them claiming to be the airplanes themselves is realistic.
So what does that leave us with?
It could be something we're not aware of. But even the policeman said that it was not an aircraft. So he knows he did not see an airplane. So it could be a UFO. Now, why they all were there, I have no idea. And why they slowed down. They claim that they're still there, but not like it used to be.
Aren't you going to discuss the possibility that these aircraft were manned by an intelligent life force that came from a different planet?
That's what a UFO is, isn't it? That's how I see it.
No, a UFO is an unidentified foreign object.
When I think of a UFO or UAP, I personally think that they're from another universe, galaxy, somewhere, and that there's another intelligence that it's not human.
Okay, I was just curious if you were going to explore that theory into more detail here.
No, because there weren't as many like abductions and sightings of aliens. It was mostly of the objects in the sky. So I'm sticking to that for this one in particular.
Got it.
But I think most people who saw them, when they said they saw a UFO, I think most of them thought that there was another intelligent being behind it or in them, like an alien or some sort. I don't think they thought it was just an object there.
I would assume, and if you couple that with the telepathic communication that some of them had, that I think would definitely spook people into thinking that something else was involved besides any sort of human. Can I look at the photos?
Yeah, you can look at the photos now.
Interesting photos.
So this is an unusual one. I wanted to keep everybody just aware of what was happening in the 80s on UFO sightings. I just find it interesting now that it's come out that there are sightings out there that the Pentagon has said, yeah, there's something out there happening. So I'm wondering how many of those would fall into that. I want to thank you for listening to us this week. We love our listeners, and because of you, we do this podcast. Your help and engagement really helps the podcast grow. If you enjoyed this episode, please text a friend and family member to listen to our podcast. Until next time, make sure you stay on the eerie side.
Bye.
Bye. And be safe.